The marble floor beneath my feet shimmered under the lobby's warm lights, but I felt cold all over. I stood there motionless, clutching a small stack of plastic hotel key cards in my hand. 5 suites, 12 people, all of them mine, and yet not a single one of them turned around as they headed toward the elevators, laughing, chattering, not once checking if I was behind them. Emery's voice echoed faintly as he joked with Blythe about forgetting sunscreen. Shira trailed behind, nose in her phone. Fallon walked silently, as usual, eyes averted. The grandchildren had already rushed ahead, too busy being children, to notice the absence of the woman who made their vacation possible. No one waited. No one said, "Come on, Mom." No one offered to take a bag from my shoulder. The receptionist smiled kindly at me, perhaps sensing something in my frozen posture, but I waved her off with a faint nod. My heart beat too loudly to speak. I pressed the key cards tighter in my hand as if the pressure might remind me that I still had control of something, anything. They didn't know what I had done for them. They didn't know that I had spent 8 long months waking up at dawn to bake pies and sell them at the Sunday market. That I'd tucked every spare coin into an old cookie tin hidden behind the dried beans in my pantry. That I'd sold Gerald's watch, his last gift to me, before cancer took him to a pawn shop in a strip mall, for a sum that made me want to cry. And not just from the money. And they didn't know the hotel reservation, every last penny of it, had been paid in full by me. They hadn't asked. I watched the elevator doors close, swallowing my family whole. For a moment I wondered if they would even notice I hadn't followed them. But I already knew the answer. The lobby wasn't empty. I was just alone. And standing there, surrounded by palms in brass pots and distant clinks of suitcases rolling across tile, I realized something far more painful than being left behind. They hadn't forgotten me. They had simply decided I wasn't necessary. I turned away from the elevator and walked slowly toward the front desk. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the trip, when the call came. I remember the sunlight stretching across my kitchen counter, warm and gentle, just like the voice on the other end of the line. "Hey, Mom," Emery said, sounding almost boyish. I had this idea, hear me out. I hadn't heard that kind of enthusiasm from him in years. Lately, our calls had been clipped, filled with logistics and obligations, birthday schedules, grandchild report cards, quick thanks for Christmas gifts. But this sounded like something more. A family trip, he said. All of us. Like old times. Somewhere warm. A beach, maybe. My chest fluttered. "You mean all of us together?" "Yeah. Me, Blythe. The kids. Shira's on board, Fallon too. You, of course. Of course. I found this hotel online, Palms by the Sea. Looks amazing. Pools, activities for the kids, full meal plans. It's perfect." He paused, then added, "Only thing is, the hotel needs one person to make the full reservation. It keeps it simpler, I guess. You think you could do that? We'll send you the money right after." Right after. I stared at the percolator as it hissed the coffee bubbling just beneath its lid. He couldn't see me smile, but I smiled anyway. The kind of smile I used to have when they were young and still needed me. Of course I said. It'd be an honor. I hung up and pulled the small wooden box from the top of the cabinet, the one that held Gerald's gold watch. I'd kept it wrapped in a silk handkerchief, untouched since his funeral. I held it a moment, then nodded to no one. The pawnshop clerk gave me far less than it was worth. I didn't even flinch. That night I made the reservation. 5 suites, 12 guests, 7 nights. Full service. I used my credit card and held my breath. When the confirmation email arrived, I stared at the screen, letting myself feel something close to joy. They had invited me. I was part of it. And if I had to pay for that feeling, well, I'd already decided it was worth the cost. Until the day they left me standing in the lobby. The morning of the trip, I stood on the porch with my suitcase, dressed in the soft blue dress Emery once said, made me look less tired. I had even curled the edges of my hair, dabbed on my late mother's rosewater perfume, and clutched the old leather tote Gerald bought me our last Christmas together. I looked nice. I felt hopeful. The SUV pulled up 15 minutes late, tires crunching against the gravel. Emery honked once, just a short beep. No one got out. I walked to the car myself. Blythe was in the front seat, eyes glued to her phone. Shira sat in the back, a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. Fallon barely nodded. Only Lane popped up from the far back seat, grinning. "Grandma!" he shouted and reached over the seat to hug me clumsily. I held on longer than I should have. We drove mostly in silence. I tried a few times asking about schoolwork, what they were excited to do at the hotel, but the replies were short. Blythe didn't look up. Shira murmured something about a podcast. Fallon just stared out the window. Still, when we arrived, and I saw the tall palms swaying against a cloudless sky, something in me lifted. The air smelled like salt and lemons. The building was stunning, painted ivory with wide terraces and polished wood balconies. For one brief moment, I believed it was going to be everything I'd imagined. But as soon as the valet took the cars and the bags were unloaded, they started drifting. Like birds scattering without warning, they disappeared in pairs, up elevators, around corners, through side doors. No, let's check in together. No, we'll wait. Just gone. When I finally walked into the restaurant that evening, they were halfway through their appetizers. Blythe looked up, feigned surprise. "Oh, we thought maybe you were tired from the drive." I smiled, stiff. "No, I was just waiting in the lobby." Oh, that was all she said. They hadn't saved me a seat. I stood there, holding my purse, as a waiter rushed to fetch another chair and squeeze it into the end of the table. It was only the first night. The next afternoon, Lane left his iPad on the lounge chair beside the pool. He and the other kids had run off toward the splash pad laughing and soaked in sunscreen. I stayed behind, content to rest in the shade and watch. The screen hadn't locked yet. It was open to a group chat, an endless stream of blue and gray bubbles. I hadn't meant to snoop. Truly, I hadn't. But my name caught my eye. Well, not my name exactly. Just a message that read, "If the old lady gets pushy again, we'll just send her to the spa for the day." I blinked. Another message followed this one from Shira Fallon. "Did you talk to the front desk about switching the reservation name? It'll make checkout easier." Fallon replied, "They said we'd need the cardholder's permission." Ugh. Then Emery, "We'll handle that on Friday, after we file the chargeback." I felt my stomach twist. I scrolled. The group was titled No Drama December. The participants, Emery, Blythe, Shira, Fallon. Not Lane, not me. Further up, I found Blythe's words, "I don't want her hovering around the kids the whole time. Let's give her space." Then Emery? Again, she doesn't even know we're not planning to reimburse her. It's better if she thinks it was her idea. I couldn't breathe for a moment. 8 months of saving. My late husband's gold watch sold for less than it was worth. All of it funneled into this trip I thought was for us, for family. But I was nothing more than a means to an end. A wallet with feet. Lane came running back, dripping and smiling. "Grandma, did you see that slide?" He scooped up the iPad before I could even shut the screen. "Oops, I forgot to close my chat." I nodded, swallowing hard. "It's all right, sweetheart." He took off again, barefoot and light, and I sat there, the laughter of my children echoing through the hotel courtyard, mocking every quiet sacrifice I had made. I closed my eyes and took a breath so deep it ached. If they could plan quietly, so could I. That evening, I skipped dinner. I told Blythe I wasn't feeling well. She barely looked up from her menu and returned to my room, locking the door with deliberate care. I pulled out my blue notebook from the bottom of my suitcase and laid it on the desk. Then I turned on the lamp and began writing. First, the hotel reservation confirmation. I noted the date, time, and reservation number. I logged the $4,200 total, the card I used, and the receipt I had printed weeks ago and folded neatly between the pages. Then I opened my email and took screenshots of the original booking messages. Every detail, every timestamp. Next, I opened my bank app and screenshotted the deposit from the pawn shop, the withdrawals for the hotel, the balance I'd left myself to survive on. Then I hit record on my phone and read every major note aloud, just in case something ever needed to be proven in my voice. When I had everything saved and copied into both a flash drive and an email to myself, I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. I dialed the front desk. "Good evening, this is Corliss Dane," I said. "I'd like to request that any modifications to the reservation be restricted." "Certainly, Ms. Dane. Since the reservation is under your name and was paid with your card, you have full authority." "Good. Please notate that only I may approve changes, no exceptions." "It's been added." I thanked her and hung up. Then I made a second call. "This one more personal." "Donatella Quinn, Office of Family Law," came the familiar voice. "It's Corliss," I said softly. "Corliss." "What's going on?" I told her briefly but clearly. About the group chat, the credit card, the plan to leave me with the bill. When I finished, there was a long pause before she said, "What they're doing? That's elder financial abuse. And if they follow through with disputing your charges, that's also fraud." "I thought so," I whispered. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet. But I need to be ready. Then let's get your paperwork in order." So I did. And when I finally laid my head on the pillow that night, I wasn't angry. I was steady. The next morning, I went down to breakfast early, just as the sunlight poured in golden across the tiled floor. I took my usual seat near the window, ordered oatmeal with berries, and watched the ocean shimmer like it hadn't hurt a thing. When Emery arrived, I greeted him with a soft, "Good morning." He looked surprised, maybe even relieved. Blythe followed, and I told her her floral dress brought out her eyes. She gave a tight smile in return, as if wondering when I'd started noticing things again. Fallon told a joke that made Lane laugh milk through his nose. Shira showed off photos she'd taken near the pool. I listened, nodded, passed the butter, and sipped my tea like I had nothing but time and family on my mind. But underneath the small talk, I was working. On my phone was a draft declaration of financial responsibility prepared with Donatella's help and already signed. A hotel copy had been notarized that morning. The flash drive sat in my purse next to my lipstick. At 10:15, I excused myself from the table, claiming I wanted to walk off the pancakes. Instead, I met Miguel near the guest services desk. He led me to a quiet hallway behind the office and closed the door behind us. I read the documents, he said, his tone low but firm. "We've restricted access per your request. You are now the sole person authorized to change, cancel, or adjust any part of the reservation." I nodded. "Thank you, Miguel." He looked at me and something softened in his expression. "This isn't the first time we've seen this, but it doesn't make it easier." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." He handed me a small folder. Inside were the final authorizations, a staff memo, and confirmation of the morning's notary stamp. "Everything clean? Everything clear? Checkout is still noon on Friday." "For them, yes." He raised a brow but said nothing more. I returned to my family by the pool, slid back into my chair, and poured myself another cup of tea. Lane splashed nearby. Shira laughed. Fallon scrolled through his phone. They had no idea the calm was almost over. At exactly 10 a.m., I set down my coffee cup and looked at the second hand on my wristwatch sweep past the 12. From the balcony of my suite, I could see them. Emery, Blythe, Shira, and Fallon towels draped around their necks, wet footprints drying quickly on the sun-baked stone, laughing as they headed toward the elevators with the children. It took about 3 minutes. At 10:03, my phone buzzed. "Emery, Mom, our room keys aren't working. Something's wrong." "Blythe, did you check us out or something?" I smiled softly and typed back one line. "Me. Try reception." At 10:06, I saw them at the front desk. I couldn't hear their voices from where I sat, but I didn't need to. I saw the frantic hand gestures, the manager flipping through the reservation folder, and Miguel stepping forward, calm as ever. Shira was the first to look up, scanning the balconies. She saw me. I didn't wave. Another message came in. "Fallon, the hotel says the rooms were canceled. What is going on?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. I didn't answer it. I let it come 3 sharp raps, then silence. Then my phone buzzed again. "Emery, you need to explain. They said you canceled the rooms. Please call me." Me, I did, as the card holder. No reply for 5 minutes. Then Blythe, "You're punishing us for what I didn't answer that either." Instead, I sat quietly and sipped my tea, the same way I had every morning for years, only now, with peace curling into the corners of my silence. Below, I watched them shuffle away from reception. Fallon looked angry. Blythe looked embarrassed. Emery, he looked like a man who'd lost something he didn't even know he had until it was gone. My room remained untouched. The view was mine alone. The stillness mine. The power mine now, too. And as they drifted like startled birds across the lobby trying to find new footing, I began packing, because I had somewhere else to be. When the second knock came firm but not aggressive, I opened the door. Emery stood in front, jaw tight. Blythe hovered just behind him, arms crossed. Shira's mascara had begun to smudge, and Fallon stood off to the side, not quite meeting my eyes. I stepped back, gesturing them in with a quiet motion. My suite was still tidy, sun-warmed, and serene. On the table, I had already laid everything out. Printed screenshots, highlighted payment receipts, a notarized copy of the declaration. The folder Miguel had given me, crisp and official, stamped and signed. I said nothing at first, just stood with my arms lightly folded and waited. Emery leaned over the table, scanning the first few pages. "Mom, what is all this?" "The truth," I said evenly. Blythe scoffed, though her voice was unsteady. "Okay, but you could have talked to us. This is dramatic. You didn't forget me at the restaurant. You didn't just overlook my name on the itinerary. You organized a group chat to exclude me. You made a plan to steal from me." Shira wiped her eyes. "We weren't stealing. We assumed it would work out. It was a miscommunication." "Miscommunication," I echoed. "So who was it that wrote, 'Let her think it was her idea. We'll dispute the charges later'?" No one answered. Fallon shifted his weight, but remained quiet. I reached for the screenshots, flipping them toward Emery. "You created the group chat, the same day you called to invite me. So this wasn't an afterthought. This was built in. This was strategy." Blythe's lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. "I sold Gerald's watch," I continued. "The last thing of his I had left. I lived with no heat-skipped meals, walked instead of busing so you could have this trip. And your plan was to cut me out once you arrived." Emery finally sat down, burying his face in his hands. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said, voice firm now. "This is betrayal." Cold and careful. The silence in the room was heavy, but I didn't let it crush me. I'd already decided what came next. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply looked at them, at the children I had raised, the partners they had chosen, the faces that once meant warmth and safety, and I told them what was going to happen. "You have 2 options," I said, hands resting gently on the back of the chair. "You can find a new hotel or you can go home. But your stay here is over. Emery blinked like he didn't understand the words. Mom, you can't be serious. I am. Blythe stepped forward, her voice shrill and shaking. You can't kick your own family out. We have children. You had no problem planning to lock me out with children present. You're being vindictive, she snapped. There will be consequences. I held her gaze. I've already consulted with a lawyer. Everything is documented. Every payment. Every message. If you want to escalate this legally, I suggest you begin by explaining your intent to commit fraud. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Fallon shifted near the door, silent. Shira sat down on the edge of the armrest, eyes glassy and unfocused. She hadn't said a word since she arrived. Then Lane knocked and peeked in from the hallway. Grandma, are they leaving now? I nodded. Once. Soon. Can I stay with you? Emery started to protest, but I cut him off with a raised hand. He can stay, if he chooses to. Lane walked in, dragging his suitcase behind him like it weighed nothing. He took the empty seat beside me and rested his hand on my arm. There was a knock. Miguel entered, polite as ever. Ms. Dane, he said calmly, we've brought the family's luggage to the front. Taxis are on standby. Let me know if you'd like assistance with your arrangements for the remainder of the week. I smiled. Thank you, Miguel. We'll stay. Blythe looked at the bags behind him. You packed our things? Miguel tilted his head. Yes. Per the change in reservation, you've been checked out. They looked stunned, caught without recourse. I looked at Lane beside me. I wasn't alone anymore. The taxi ride was quiet, but not heavy. Lane leaned against the window, his small hand resting on mine as we passed the curve of the highway that hugged the sea. The sun had started to dip, casting the sky in streaks of amber and pale lavender. For the first time in days, perhaps in years, I felt like I could exhale. The coastal inn wasn't flashy, but it was beautiful. A wraparound porch, painted shutters, seashells scattered along the path leading to the beach. The owner greeted us with warm eyes and no recognition in her voice, which felt like a gift. We weren't someone's burden here. We were simply guests. Our room smelled like salt and linen. Lane ran to the window and pointed to the shore where low tide had left long stretches of wet sand just waiting to be molded. He looked back at me with a grin that made my heart ache. Can we go? I didn't even need to answer. Minutes later, our shoes were off. Our pant legs rolled and we were kneeling in the sand. Lane showed me how to carve windows into towers with the edge of a shell. I taught him how to pack the walls so they didn't collapse under the wind. We built a castle with 5 towers and a crooked moat that the waves lapped at slowly. He laughed every time the water reached it and dragged some of it away. I sat back after a while, wiping my hands on my skirt, and looked out at the horizon. The tide was coming in steady. So much of my life had been spent managing tides, making sure everyone else stayed afloat, even as I sank. I spent 30 years paying for peace, I said aloud, mostly to myself. This time, I paid for freedom. Lane didn't say anything. He just reached over and squeezed my hand tight and sure. We sat like that for a while until the sun touched the water and our castle started to lean. Maybe this is what family should feel like. Chapter main character. Corliss Dane, 66. Widow, former librarian, composed and quiet, underestimated by her family. Word count 350. Corliss stands in the glowing marble lobby, watching her family disappear toward the elevators, laughing. No one turns back. She clenches the hotel keycards in her hand. She had paid for every room with her savings. 8 months of early mornings, homemade pies, and a pawned wedding ring. Hook question. Why had she paid for a family that clearly wanted nothing to do with her word count 350? Flashback. 3 weeks earlier, Emery had called her with warmth in his voice, suggesting a family trip. Corliss, long ignored, is thrilled. You book it, we'll reimburse you, he says. She sells the gold watch left by her husband and books 5 suites for 12 people. She hides the sacrifice behind her usual quiet smile. Hook question. Did they ever intend to pay her back? Word count 350. The family picks her up for the trip but barely greets her. Blythe is on her phone. Shira fakes smiles. Fallon mumbles. Only Lane hugs her. The hotel is stunning. Corliss lights up until they all vanish into their rooms without a word. At dinner, she's forgotten. Hook question. Was this just a misunderstanding or something much worse? Word count 400. Lane accidentally leaves his iPad unlocked. Corliss stumbles upon a group chat called No Drama December. She scrolls through cruel messages, jokes about the old lady, plans to switch the reservation to Fallon, and a message will dispute the charges later. She won't know. Hook question. Would she confront them or use their own plan against them? Word count 350. Corliss starts gathering everything. Email confirmations, credit card charges, even voice memos. She contacts the hotel and adds a restriction. Only she can change the reservation. Then she calls her lawyer friend, Donatella Quinn, who confirms it's elder financial abuse. Hook question. Was it time to fight? Or wait until the perfect moment? Word count 350. Corliss smiles at breakfast, makes small talk, even compliments Blythe's dress. Her children are oblivious. Meanwhile, she prepares her legal declaration, and the hotel grants her sole authority. Miguel, the manager, is discreetly supportive. Hook question. What would happen when the keys stopped working? Word count 400, 10 a.m. sharp. The family's keycards deactivate. Confusion erupts. Corliss receives messages. Mom, something's wrong. She calmly texts. Try reception. They learn the rooms were canceled by the cardholder. Corliss. Hook question. Would they grovel or explode? Word count 400. Corliss lets them in. She calmly lays out the proof screenshots, payment logs, legal filings. Emery tries denial. Blythe blames miscommunication. Shira cries. Fallon stays silent. Corliss replies, this was not neglect, it was strategy. Hook question. What punishment fits a betrayal? This deep word, count 400. She gives them 2 options, find a new hotel or return home. Lane chooses to stay with her. The others panic. Blythe threatens legal action. Corliss replies she already spoke with attorneys. Miguel confirms their bags are packed. Hook question. Was this the end of their family, or the start of Corliss's? Word count 450. Corliss and Lane ride in a cab to a peaceful coastal inn. She looks out at the sea and says, I spent 30 years paying for peace. This time, I paid for freedom. Lane squeezes her hand. They build sandcastles as the sun sets. Final line. Maybe this is what family should feel like. Hook question. Would she ever let the others back in? If they came with honesty.